So good morning, everyone. Everyone who's super prompt. Look at that. It's just turned 10 a.m. and there were already people in the waiting room. So we're just going to give it a minute or two as people are hopefully making themselves comfortable with a nice warm cup of tea or coffee and getting comfortable to listen to our Simon Talks this morning. My name is Ber Grogan. I'm the executive director of Simon Communities of Ireland. I'm not sure if I can call myself new anymore because it's nearly 6 months. So hopefully some of you are returning each month to our different Simon Talks. So if it's your first one or if you are returning, we won't have the chat function, won't be open, but there is the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and you'll be able to either type away questions in there and then we'll address them at the end, or if you want to wait until after the presentation and we'll address them then. Just to say before we get started as well, the paper that Dr. Altaf Hossain will be discussing is actually on the Geary website at the moment, and there's also a policy piece on publicpolicy.ie. So the paper has been published and is publicly available at the moment. It's probably going to be about 40 minutes or so of a presentation. We're going to have Professor Michelle Norris first, speaking to us a little bit to kind of set the scene and the context, and then Dr. Altaf Hossain speaking about the particular paper and research, really interesting research that's been done around housing precarity and Bangladeshi migrants in Dublin. So just obviously to say thank you to Ailish for sorting all of this out and for our speakers here today. So I'm sure Professor Michelle Norris will need no introduction to those of you in the area. So Michelle is the director of the Geary Institute for Public Policy, was on the Housing Commission, has been involved in over 30 research projects, over 200 works on the issues, and is just a household name really for those of us working in housing and homelessness. And then Dr. Altaf Hossain is the postdoctoral research fellow at the Geary Institute, and his current project is looking at the housing precarity experienced by Bangladeshi immigrants living in Dublin. And he's from Bangladesh and speaks the language as well. So we're going to hear some really interesting research findings from Altaf. So without further ado, I'm going to be quiet here and turn my camera off, and I'll come back then at the end. So we'll have Michelle, and then Michelle, you can hand over directly to Altaf, and I'll see you both afterwards. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks to Ber and Eilish and colleagues from the Simon community for facilitating this presentation by my colleague Dr. Altaf Hossain and I. So as Ber mentioned, the paper this morning looks at research we've been involved in on housing precarity among Bangladeshi migrants to Dublin. And just to acknowledge, it was funded by the Mari Sarkozy Curie Action Programme, which is an EU funding programme for research. So the paper examines the housing experiences of low-income Bangladeshi migrants to Dublin, and we're particularly interested in the multiple precarities they face. So they face problems related to precarious jobs, relatively weak legal status in the country as migrants, in many cases lower skills than other migrant populations that impede their access to highly paid jobs. And we're looking at how this shapes their pathways through the housing sector, their experiences of housing, and the meanings of housing and home. So I won't go into this in too much depth, but the analysis today draws on a very influential book on housing called The Meaning of Housing, A Pathways Approach, that looks at how people progress through different housing experiences across their lifetime and how this influences and is influenced by how they view home and the meanings of home. So published in a very influential book by David Clapham. So my colleague Altaf Hossain is going to talk to you about the research findings, but I just want to set the scene first briefly by talking about the research, which the fieldwork for the research was conducted by Altaf using anthropological research methods. So Altaf is an anthropologist, and it involved making contact with low-income Bangladeshi migrants to Dublin, and then using snowball sampling, as we call it, getting one group of migrants to introduce them to other people within their community, and making contact in that way. So the research was conducted in 3 locations in Dublin, because but 3 suburban locations in Dublin, Lucan, Clondalkin and Tala, because even though Altaf started the research in the city centre, it soon became obvious that most Bangladeshi migrants to Dublin live in the outer suburbs, and in particular in those suburbs. So the paper is focused on Bangladeshi migrants. So these are a very small proportion of migrants to Ireland. Migrants from South Asia in general, Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi citizens make up about 2% of the population of Ireland. And the number of Bangladeshi Irish or Bangladeshi citizens living in the country was just about 2,500 according to the 2022 census. But the number of Bangladeshi migrants to Ireland is growing, and they were among the top 5 nationalities who applied for asylum in Ireland in 2024, May 2024, for instance. So even though the paper today is focusing on Bangladeshi migrants, it's worth emphasising that in common with other migrants, there are particular problems in relation to housing and precarious housing, unaffordable housing, that affect people from a migrant background particularly strongly, and particularly migrants from outside the EU. So migrants from outside the EU generally have more precarious legal status in the country. It does vary between countries, but migrants from Bangladesh tend to be in low-skilled jobs, and that affects the type of housing they can get access to. Migrants from outside the EU are generally not eligible for social housing unless they have long-term residency in the country or citizenship. And migrants have a lot of trouble accessing home ownership housing, because they may not have a credit record in the country, they may not have a deposit to buy a house. So they're really funneled heavily into private rented housing. And there is a lot of evidence that in particular non-EU nationals tend to live in more overcrowded accommodation, and they're particularly prone to housing precarity and homelessness. And our research bears that out. So as I mentioned, the study we're going to talk to about today is a anthropological quasi-ethnographic approach. Interviewees were recruited by Altaf from networking around mosques, coffee shops, university campuses, South Asian shops, places where Bangladeshi migrants are likely to congregate. We identified some long-standing Bangladeshi migrants to Dublin that introduced us to other migrants. And Altaf also examined, in particular, websites, particularly Facebook groups, also WhatsApp groups that are used by migrants to let accommodation, and particularly to sublet accommodation with people from the same nationality or the same faith background. And as we'll see, sublet accommodation is a major source of accommodation for Bangladeshi migrants. So in total, the number of people interviewed for the study was 42. The vast majority of those were interviewed on several occasions to get their good detailed picture of their progress through the housing system. You can see the professions or jobs of the people we interviewed there in the slide. Many of them were in low-paid jobs. Some were naturalised Irish citizens, some had got social housing, but the vast majority weren't. And a lot were living in shared accommodation, and that's what we're going to focus on today. So I'm now going to hand over to Altaf, who's going to talk about the 3 key themes in the research, starting with suburbanisation. So thanks, Altaf.
Thank you, Michelle, for covering the theoretical and methodological part of this paper. So I'm going to share our empirical findings. So we end up with the three theme. So number one is we call it suburbanization. Bangladeshi migrants began to arrive in Ireland in the early 2000s directly from Malaysia. That was their initial migration destination. So that during that period, a good number of Bangladeshi migrants who worked in Malaysia. So they are employed by a Red Cow Hotel, which is located in Atala, and those migrants were now at this moment are very successful. So the recent arrivals interviewed call these initial arrivals old and successful migrants because over time they have gained permanent residency. For example, stamp 4, or they have been naturalized Irish citizens, so they hold Irish passports. So some of them bought houses, and some of them have a good reputation in the informal housing market. And these suburban areas are very popular to Bangladeshi migrants because most of them are Muslim migrants. And I have to mention that Bangladesh is a Muslim majority country. More than 90% were Muslim people. So there are a mosque and a South Asian grocery shops. So mosques are popular place for socialization and prayer, definitely, and to attend religious festivals. And grocery shops are they socialize there, and they hang out around the grocery shops because they can buy native food and halal meat, etc. That gives them a flavor of home, that gives them they connect with the home at the grocery shop. And also these places are a source of relatively cheap rent, and this area is connected by a public transport to come to the city center to their workplace. For example, a participant called Saurabh is a retail assistant. He said that before arriving in Ireland, my father arranged shared accommodation in Clondalkin. One of his friends live in Clondalkin. He told my father that if I wanted, I could move to his house, which he rented. He subletted a room with 2 beds for 2 single people. I learned that the rent of 400 per month was not too high compared to other neighborhoods around the city center. I checked with the .ie that house rent is too high in the city. I can't afford it. Besides, there is the Bangladeshi community in Clondalkin. I was told that public transport would be the easiest way to get to the city center, and public transport is my only hope since I can't afford a car. So in this way, they actually connected with this social network, with the Bangladeshi network. And if we let me talk about our theme 2, the sharing accommodation, and in this section we'll say that informal housing submarket among Bangladeshi migrants emerged in recent years. Old migrants have established an informal housing market in these neighborhoods, to which new arrivals can connect via social media, particularly through Facebook and very private or WhatsApp groups. It is very hard to get access to the social media group, but my identity as a Bangladeshi citizen and researcher at UCD helped me that gave them a trust, and that I will do a research about the housing crisis. They thought that I would demonstrate the crisis they have been facing. And you can see that 2 advertisements in the right-hand side. So top image, it's in written Bengali. So it's in plain English, it is a room is available in Dublin's Lucan area. It is suitable room for two students, a working professional, or a couple. A Bangladeshi man rents a house, so contact. And the bottom image, same, Bangladeshi landlord advertised a bedroom for rent in Lukan on social media. So they actually prefer to find information about housing as well as employment opportunities on the social media because they rely on informal contracts. And if you see the pictures, the three beds, very cozy room, and they have a limited options. That's why they live in this arrangement because they cannot afford down payment or rent for an entire house or apartment because their income is too low and often unreliable. And moreover, as non-native English speaking migrants, they face additional barriers to accessing private rental sector tenancies because they have not previously rented accommodation or worked in Ireland, so they cannot produce the landlord and employer references. And also, they're Bengali speaking people, and English is not their first language, and they are mostly low paid migrants, so they have low skills, and so they don't have that confidence that they will negotiate with English speaking landlords about housing or rent. And they like to go with the informal agreement, as I said earlier. For example, Akbar, participant, he says that Irish landlords ask for pay slips, full deposit or down payment, and reference letters from previous landlords. Bangladeshi landlords or primary tenants or head tenants who rent their house for rent or sublet remain flexible and go through verbal contracts. Irish landlords do not allow their houses to be overcrowded. This is why we Bangladeshis usually stick with Deshi, our own community people, when renting accommodation. For example, we 7 people live in this house. I can imagine 7 people live in a single house, and the house gets smelly and unhygienic. But what can we do? We, him and his other housemates, all of our Bangladeshi migrants, cannot afford to rent a single room for us. And there are some advantages in informal submarket dominated by Bangladeshi migrants among the community, and because it is they feel comfortable with living with the same ethnic group and same language speaking people. If you do not have a good job, uh, for example, Rabil says, if you do not have a good job or high-paying job, no landlord will want to rent your house. I want to review several houses, but no one selected me as a tenant. Maybe I do not have a good job. Moreover, they know that Bangladeshi migrants work for low wages and have a smell in their cooking, so they do not want to rent to us. A Bangladeshi brother, uh, a head tenant. Actually, there is no kinship ties. There is no blood relations. So, senior Bangladeshi migrants are called by a brother informally. A Bangladeshi brother maintains the house where he lived during the interview. It is easier to live with the same ethnic people. We cook the same food and gossip about the same topics. Particularly, they love to talk about, gossip about everyday events in Bangladesh, particularly politics and cricket, of course. And they love to live with same cultural background because there's a little tension between two religious group, Muslim and Hindus, and also they're migrant, and Ireland is a Catholic majority country, so they want to practice their religious life, so that's why they want to live with, particularly Muslims, they want to live with the Muslims from the same country. Sharing with people same ethnic background is preferable as they share the same language and same cultural background. Muslim participants preferred not to share accommodation with non-Muslims, particularly Christians, primarily due to their pork consumption, and they are religiously obedient. So Muslims are obliged to avoid utensils to use to cook porks, because that's a big tension for them. So in this study, we found that kitchen is the very important thing in their house. So they want to use the kitchen, so that because they cannot afford buying eating out, so mostly they buy groceries from Asian shops and cook, because it's a way to save money. To save money, low-income migrants usually cook food at home. So sharing the kitchen with members of the same faith is very essential for them. And some interviews found that sharing a house with non-Muslims or non-Bangladeshis are a cultural shock, because their culture does not allow non-married individuals of the opposite sex to share a room. And I found some Bangladeshi migrants, that my participants, that they left a house because they found that boy and a girl, I mean a couple, live in a single room. He found it very unusual for him, so that's why he left the house. And similarly, all Bangladeshi Hindu migrants interviewed prefer to share accommodation with the Hindus, because Hindus do not want to live in the same house with Muslims, uh, because Muslims cook beef. Even though if they are from the same country, from Bangladesh, but they want to share the house, and they don't want to share the kitchen particularly. And sharing accommodation with the same cultural background or gives some advantages. For example, informal remittance service through mutual understanding. It is a sort of informal, and maybe it is illegal to send a remittance home without paying tax or particular fees. For example, Akhtar, a participant, explained that I have been in Ireland for almost 8 years. I have been with the Bangladeshis since the beginning. A Bangladeshi brother who worked with me in the kitchen first told me a bed would be rented in Lucan. It was good for me because everyone in that house was Bangladeshi except one Pakistani. Sharing the house with other people causes some problems. It happens everywhere. When you keep 5 pots in one place, there will be a collision and there will be some noise. But there are some advantages. When a housemate goes home, we send gifts or money with him to give to my family. When he returns, my family sends me items, preferably medicine and clothes and dry food, through him. I did the same for my roommate and other Deshi Manus, Deshi people from own country. So these are the practical advantages, and that's why they want to share accommodation with the same cultural background people. And theme 3 is called a sacrifice. Although they they hope that they will bring their family one day, but they have to spend maybe it's 5 to 10 years. I found that one man is have been living for 12 years. Still now he couldn't sponsor his family. So the sacrifices necessitated by their multidimensional precarity also influence their housing pathways. If you see, as you can see, the two beds in a very small room, so they live in such a room. So they sacrifice their privacy, they sacrifice their family, and migrating alone and leaving family members in their country of origin is a very common strategy to find better economic opportunities. There are 3 beds in one room, and it's not a bedroom though. It's a converted bedroom. This a participant called Ripon, his retail assistant, he put it that my income is not too bad compared to that of other retail staff working at Bangladeshi shops, but I cannot afford a family room, at least a two-bedroom. If I brought my wife here, I could only feed her. I could not afford to give her a home. I cannot afford to give her a decent place to live. Providing 3 meals to a family is not enough for a happy life. Without a house, how is it possible to live with family for the immigrants? So I found that they have been living here more than a decade. Still now they end up with this housing condition because they hope that one day they would bring their family here and they would make a happy life and they would apply for social housing. They cannot afford buying a home here. Social housing is the only one hope. Of course, it's not for all, particularly who are naturalized Irish citizen. They deem for this, and it increases social exclusion. For example, Jamshed, a man, he earns approximately 22,000 euro annually, which is certainly not enough to afford a house for his family. And he resides in a shared apartment in a suburban area of Dublin. He sorrowfully puts it, I miss my family. I have planned to bring them here, but my income is too low to sponsor them. Also, where can I put them? The rent is so high. At least I need a two-bedroom apartment to lead a family life here. I'll not be able to rent even a small apartment soon. Sometimes I think about returning home, but when I consider my family being here, my daughter would receive a world-class education in Ireland. I'll try for a few more years to become eligible to bring my family here. We concluded that a strict immigration policy and a strict family unification policy and limited access to affordable housing created a social exclusion among immigrants, and many lived in severely overcrowded conditions, and the resulting lack of privacy created the tensions. And I know a family that he couldn't sponsor his family. They lived in Bangladesh, and he has been living in Ireland for more than 10 years. So he was in tense, and he has been suffering from mental issues, psychological issues, and I I have been told that a month ago that he had a heart attack and he was brought to a hospital. So when I interviewed him, he was talking about his mental trauma that he lives in Ireland, and his family, his wife and two boys live in Bangladesh. I interviewed a female. Her name is Shampa, and in her early 20s, worked in two part-time jobs as a retail assistant and a carer. She lived with a Bangladeshi family and paid 500 euro per month to rent a bed in a single bedroom that contained two bunk beds, a chair, and a table. She had to keep her belongings, for example, mobile phone, laptop, and notebooks, on the bunk bed, and clothes in her suitcase. She complained the house owner's wife, Bangladeshi migrant, was so rude. She occupied the kitchen and living space. She indirectly told me not to use the living space. So here I must say that living with the same cultural background group also brings some disadvantages, because some migrants exploit new migrants and they take advantages, and they have been very unfair, as they do not know about the housing market in Ireland. So those some of migrants took advantages, and they sacrifice their family life for some practical reason, because living in one room or living with shared housing also made them saving money. As you see in the right hand side, that 1 euro equals BDT, Bangladeshi currency, 137 37. So it's a huge money in context of Bangladesh. So some of them um, uh, live in Ireland and they saved money. They want to because they are not sure that they will live in Ireland for forever. So that's why they send money to home and they invest in property. And remittances used to invest in property and fixed deposit in banks, and savings are brought to Ireland with the hope of purchasing a home in the future. So this is the way that they save in money in home so that they can bring it money to Ireland, because saving money in Bangladesh is very profitable compared to Ireland. Based on our empirical findings, we can conclude that that there are precarious multiple precarity that create housing and precarity. And for example, Clapham points out that a house is a physical structure, but also the setting for some of our most important emotional and intimate relations and behavior. And the meaning of house and home are not limited to the physical structure of the dwelling. As Clapham argues, the meaning of house and home does not stop at the front door. Feelings about the house will be influenced by the perceived physical and social environment outside the front door. Notably, among some women interviewed, the perception of home goes beyond the dwelling place, and Ireland was the new home and had a significant symbolic meaning for them. I will explain in a few minutes that the meaning of home is different to men and women. So the meaning of home are influenced by their housing, employment, and legal precarity. So if you, as you see that picture of the house and the two bunk beds, some migrants do not complain about it because they know that their economic affordability, they cannot afford a single room. So they know their immigration status is very weak at this moment. Just they completed their academic courses, so they have been looking for employment permit that will allow them to stay in Ireland for a longer period. So their meaning of home for them is just a place to sleep under a roof, and they perceive housing as merely a shelter and a basic necessity. It's very crucial for them to finding the right employer or getting a work permit is a considerable uncertainty. Under these circumstances, housing quality, comfort, and overcrowding are the least of the concerns for them. For example, a taxi driver put it, "We were young. One thing was in our minds. We had to work hard to make money. We are the same age, work hard, and were happy. We spent almost the whole day in the restaurant. We came home to sleep. The quality of house was not our intention. Our priority was peacefully completing the 2 year contract with the employer under the work permit visa. Because when they complete their contract, they will they can get a reference later, and that they can get experience later, so that they can apply for they can they can upgrade their immigration status in Ireland. A successful 2 year period of working in Ireland with a work permit makes his immigration status strong. So, as you see that the immigration policy is very strict, and it nearly takes 10 to 15 years to be eligible for STEM 4 for those who are who moved to Ireland as a student. But those who are moved to Ireland with a work permit, that is STEM 1, they need fewer years, say 5 to 8 years. So it is their dream that it's a golden ticket for non-European migrants, particularly Bangladeshi migrants. And work permit 1, STEM 1, and then after 5 years they can apply STEM 4, and after 3 or 5 years they can apply for Irish passports. So they are ready to face this uncertainty. They are ready to face this overcrowded and unhygienic condition in housing, unless they will get a stamp 4 or Irish passport, because they know that this immigration status will provide them with state supports until receiving stamp for Irish passport. They must, I mean, they don't have options but to live in shared accommodation. As you see in this pictures, it's a kitchen shared by 12 sharers in a single house. And sharing a kitchen with the same cultural background is very much expected. They know that they have to share the kitchen with many people, and this is the way they can eat their halal meat, and they can have a traditional food, and pork-free kitchen for Muslims and beef-free kitchen for Hindus. So as I said earlier, that kitchen plays an important role in maintaining good relationships with fellow sharers. In this study, we found that the meaning of house is different based on that gender identity. For example, males' perspectives, economic and social value of all sorts of jobs. And one taxi driver says that I can proudly say that I'm doing for living in Ireland, but in Bangladesh, the situation is quite the opposite. Society does not value my work. It means that working as a retail assistant and working as a kitchen porter and working as a taxi driver are not recognized jobs in Bangladesh. But here, these jobs are recognized, so they enjoy working here. And I cannot afford to buy a home in Ireland. I'm sure my children will be able to afford it as they were born Irish. That's their hope. And females' perspectives are different. They felt blessed to be away from the negative elements faced in Bangladesh, including corruption, poor governance, political unrest, and of course, gender discrimination. One female, one girl named Fatima, she says that Ireland is the home that I dream of, where I have freedom. No one will tell me what to wear and when to return home. In Bangladesh, I frequently faced criticism for working outside and uneasy looks from strangers when I walked in at night, heading home from work. Here, no such things I face. So I found that females are much more put symbolic value to a home, as Ireland is a home. Let us conclude that Bangladeshi migrants' housing pathways encompass residential suburbanization and the sharing of privately rented accommodation with other migrants of the same nationality and religion, coupled with the sacrifice of comfort, of course, and privacy and family life. And these housing pathways are distinctive compared to the Irish population at large, but of course not unusual compared to the other global cities where migrant populations in other high-income cities internationally are periods of modern history. And migrants' employment and income precarity linked to their legal precarity leads to housing precarity, which in turn significantly restricts their choice of places to live and types of accommodation. Sometimes I found for some cases that I couldn't recognize their legal status in Ireland at this moment, because they shared several stories, and it's very hard to make a conclusion that are they legal migrant or undocumented migrant. And so their illegal their immigration status is in precarious. And sacrifice family lives suggest that the dominant meaning of home is likely to change over time. because they have been living here, living in one room with other fellow Bangladeshi migrants, 5 to 8 years or 10 years. So they have become family members, and they had good relation. They build good relations. I mean, they have to build good relations with the primary tenants or head tenants, and in this way they share their everyday stories, and they share native food. And thus, over the time, their perception of home is likely to become less instrumentalist and focused on the contribution their home plays, securing their legal and employment status, and more focused on the role of home in providing their family with stability, security, and privacy, and hot against terms ontological security. So they know that they have to face a workout in shared housing and income insecurity, and for their hope that they one day they would become Irish citizen, and they would sponsor their family, and they would that would make possibility for their children to have Irish education, or world-class education in Ireland, that gives opportunity to connect with the broader labor market in English, particularly in English-speaking country. I must stop here. Thank you very much for listening. So if you have any questions or comments, I'm
Thank,
happy to answer.
thank you so much, Altaf. That was fascinating. I was taking some notes, so you'll see Altaf's email address there, and Michelle's email as well. And just to remind people that if you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A box, and I'll put them to Altaf now. So yeah, a couple of things just while we're waiting to see if any of the attendees want to ask any specific questions. How long were you doing this research? What was the kind of the time frame of it?
Actually, it's still now it's ongoing. So in as we said that we employed anthropological approach, quasi ethnographic approach. So still now I'm collecting data, so that it's a 2 years project. So from my side, I'd like to say that within that time frame, I'd like to collect more data as possible. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I collected data with two phases, in 2024 for 6 months, and in 25 for 4 months. Yeah, because it is very hard to find right participants, as they work in most of them work in city centers, and they live in suburban areas, and they constantly on the move, you know. So I contacted one participant that they work in a grocery shop in a city center, and he gave me time, and I have been there, and I've been told that, oh, he changed the job. Yeah.
And someone is asking here, what was the typical educational background of the participants, the people that you spoke to?
All right. So as I said, that they are mostly low-paid migrants. So they completed primary education and high school education, and they they worked as labor in Malaysia, and they hired as skilled labor, but a good number of students moved to Ireland, and they completed their bachelor education, and they do master's course at colleges in the city center. I'm sure that you know about the colleges, the name of the colleges. For example, DBS, Dublin Business School, and Griffith College, and National College Ireland. So these are the popular colleges that it is comparatively it is easier to get admission. And compared to universities.
Okay.
Yeah. So when they finish their courses, so they're legal migrants. They're legal migrants as students. When they finish their courses, they're allowed to work for 2 years, nearly 2 years with STEM 1G. So STEM 2 is for student, and when they finish their education, their status upgraded to 1G for nearly for 2 years. After 2 years, they are not allowed to stay in Ireland unless they got admission into another course, another postgraduate course, or they are hired by an employer with work permit. So it is their big challenge. So like migrants from from European countries, they can easily stay here whether they finished courses or not. But for South Asian migrants, they have to be employed with a work permit.
And did you find, someone else is asking here, so if people have done their master's or their bachelor's degree, were they able to access kind of higher paying work,
And
or?
I know that's the tricky period for them because they know that they'll not be hired, but they put their hope on old Bangladeshi migrants who are successful entrepreneurs here. So most of them run grocery shops and Indian restaurants. Yeah, actually, Indian restaurants are not owned by mostly Indians. It's owned by Bangladeshi, Pakistani, all South Asians. I know Indian is a broader term for South Asian.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
So
in
it's still that community part then that
yeah.
you hope. Okay, okay.
Yeah, so Indian food is a brand. If I say there's a Bangladeshi food, people will don't know about it. But it's a brand established in London.
Okay.
So yeah, so they hope that Bangladeshi entrepreneurs will arrange a work permit. So I found that a couple of them were hired as a curry chef, although they had no formal training in hospitality sector, but somehow they arrange this. So that's their best hope.
Okay, okay.
And yeah, best hope. And in this way, they were actually exploited by the entrepreneurs. And
Mm,
there is a dark side in this sector. And I saw that I was very fortunate to observe a kitchen in some Indian restaurants because they allowed me to enter the kitchen, and I saw that they work as a kitchen porter. You know, they finish their masters, and but they have no options just to survive and to pay the rent. And in some cases, entrepreneurs rent houses for their staff. In this way, they live in a very overcrowded area. And
mm.
in city center, it is not visual unless you enter that premise. Uh, you cannot see. It is invisible from outside. That um, um, over the restaurant, over the roof, there is a house for this stuff. So in two-bedroom apartments or two-bedroom house, maybe there are 12 staffs there.
Yeah, and actually, I see, when I saw Paul Gavin on the attendee list, I'm not surprised he's put in a question about
Okay.
the trade unions, but
Yeah.
low pay and precarious work seem endemic here. Is there a role for trade unions? So he's asking, is there a tradition of joining trade unions among the Bangladeshi community? Because we've seen in Ireland, in the hospitality sector, across the sector, that there had been issues, and sometimes trade unions have stood into that space. But is that something that's usual in the Bangladeshi community, that people would get involved in trade unions?
No, they actually avoid to engage with the formal bodies, so they are highly influenced by Bangladeshi community in an informal way. They are divided divided by political groups.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, they live in Ireland, they live in Europe, but they practice Bangladeshi values and Islamic values, and it's very interesting that they don't practice religion in Bangladesh much, but in Ireland they practice religion so much, and and in this way they build a community. Because I think what I observed from my anthropological point of view, that religion work as a shield, so that they don't want to mix with the European culture, and in this way they prevent, um, they stop their children to mix with the to socialize with the European culture, because they believe that one day they will return home. Ultimately, they will return home, and yeah.
So the idea of going to being in Ireland for a better life and to, the educational attainment and but then to go home with better prospects and
Yes,
that's
yes,
okay, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yes. They want to sacrifice their life. Parents, they want to sacrifice their lives, and they dream about their children will settle here
Mm,
in Ireland, and particularly not in Ireland. Particularly, they think that as Ireland is the only English-speaking country in the Europe at this moment after Brexit, so their main target was moving to England, because as you know that there is a historical connection between England and Bangladesh and South Asia because of colonialism, of course.
mm,
And there's a big Bangladeshi community particularly in East London and other parts of England. And there are a couple of public representatives, or member of parliament. So this is their hope that they will move to England. But after Brexit, that hope are gone. Yeah. So
yeah.
so they thought that Ireland could be their a second option.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, to move to live in English speaking country. Mm.
Uh,
Although although in community they don't speak in English, but they think that their next generation, their children, will embrace. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I won't make any comments about Ireland been much better. But anyway, another attendee has asked about the women's experiences in the research, that the differences seem to be quite different. And do you have any plans to increase the sample and representation of women?
Yes,
And they
of course, of course. That's why I told you to your first question that I would like to collect more data from the women, actually,
mm,
because it's a big challenge for me as a researcher to get access to women community, because culturally they are not allowed, as I'm sorry to use this word, they are not allowed to talk to men stranger like me. Yeah, because most of them are housewife, and and I must say that in before an interview, I was almost attacked by a man talking to his wife. Yeah, because I post on social media that if anyone interested to be an interviewee for this research, he or she will be given 20 euro as a gift. So
mm,
one girl, she's a woman at her late 30s. So she contacted me through social media. So yes, she said that okay, I can give time for 30 minutes Then I've been there at her door, and her husband came, and her husband told me that no, you're not allowed to talk to my wife. I said no, I got her appointment. I in a and no, and I was almost attacked. Yeah. And then yeah, this is the experience I got.
Mm.
So I talked to some community leaders that if they allow me to talk to women, it's very hard. They don't want to talk to me. And usually students who studied at universities, they are ready to talk. Yeah,
Okay.
they gave me time, who work as a research associate or research assistant.
Mm.
Yeah, so for them it's a dream country for them, because in Bangladesh, they don't have that freedom
Okay.
and freedom of speech, because it's the society is dominated by patriarchal norms. Yeah. So
Mm.
for them, living in shared accommodation or even in a overcrowded accommodation is nothing for them. They think that okay, we don't stay at home for the whole day. We have coffee shop, we have campus, we have park, we have a Grafton Street. Yeah. So that's the enjoy.
Yeah. So just one other question here before we finish up. And sorry that I went to the other ones first, but they say, thanks for sharing the research, very interesting. It seems the experience of Bangladeshi people migrating to Ireland is very similar to the same community in the UK who are lower paid and concentrated in social housing. Are there any lessons to be learned from the UK experience?
Yes. I think that immigration policy is too strict for Bangladeshi migrants, particularly for South Asian migrants, and because it takes um, it takes nearly 10 years to be eligible for apply for social housing, because they cannot afford buying house. They cannot afford. Another big challenge is, if they have savings in Bangladesh, they cannot bring that money to Ireland in a proper way, because Bangladesh Central Bank don't allow to transfer money in that way. But in illegal way they can, but it's always risky. And so it could be easier for them if their work permit, the rules about work permit is made flexible, because they complete their graduation, but they are not hired. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
and also employers don't have enough information about how STEM works, how visa STEM works.
Mm.
Even though I have at this point I have a STEM 4, but I had a couple of months I had a STEM 1 critical skill. I'm allowed to work without work permit, but I applied for different job, and employers don't know that I'm allowed to work.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and I think we're going to be talking to you again, Altaf, because even the things that we've been hearing recently that around possible changes to legislation in Ireland around accessing social housing and things like that. So I do think it's great that you're doing this study, and even the pieces around three people in a room paying €400 each for a room, and then it's like, but how much is the overall rent? There's so many more questions from it. So
yes,
really interested to see what else comes from the study. Someone had suggested there, and I know you said it yourself about having a female interviewer, with you, or to interview the female Bangladeshi women, because it would be really great to get their
yes, yeah.
perspective. But
Yeah.
thank you
That's a
so much. It's been really, really fascinating, and it's great to see. I think there's so many parallels to a lot of the different migrant communities that we're seeing, and around access to the completely unaffordable private rental sector. But just to remind everyone, yeah, great presentation. It really was. Thank you so much, Altaf, and we'll
It's
let
my
everyone
pleasure.
let everyone go back to their rainy Monday morning, and we'll
All
be in
right.
touch with you soon. Thank you so much. It was great.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Take care. Thanks everyone for joining us. Bye.